In our episode today, I'm joined by the wonderful Seham AlHusaini, General Manager at Deliveroo, covering the Kuwait and Qatar markets. Seham is an experienced director with demonstrated history of working in the financial services and the tech-focused logistics and supply chain industry at the global level. She's also a board member of Al Jazeera Airways. Welcome, Seham, and thank you for taking the time today to join us and share with us your story.
Thank you, Mona. It's an absolute pleasure. So I'm delighted to be here.
So let's get started. Through your career journey, Seham, what were the two most important decisions that you have taken that have brought you to where you are today in your career?
So two points, maybe some of it mixed in with education decisions. But the first one, I think, was my decision to go and do my MBA. So this is kind of in my early career. I had studied engineering, and I was starting to figure out, when you first kind of come out of college and realizing what the work world is like, starting to try to find my identity as a professional. And after kind of about a year and a half working in some site construction and in the engineering field, I decided I wanted to go do my MBA. And I think that was a very pivotal decision, a pivotal shift for me in the very, very early stages of my career, to kind of expose me to the business world, to expose me to the potential opportunities outside of like the engineering world and kind of the academic world that I had studied in. And going, I ended up going to Columbia to do my MBA. And I just, it was such an eye-opening experience really around the potential and the potential career opportunities you could have, and things you can do. And so going to Columbia really opened my eyes. And from there, I did a complete career shift. I went into consulting with strategy and doing financial services consulting. And not that ended up necessarily being the my long-term kind of future career, but it just opened my eyes to the opportunity and the ability to be a bit uncommitted to any particular career or industry. You can kind of do anything if you had the right skills and if you had the right opportunities. So that was a very, very pivotal kind of shift in my career. And then the second was my decision to join Deliveroo, where I work today. And in that sense, I think I had spent about 6 years working in the business world. I was a consultant. I was working with a larger corporation, Agility at the time. And my decision to join a company like Deliveroo was much more of a change in mindset around it, taking a bet and doing something from scratch. And yeah, like going into the unknown versus my start in the business world and a business career was much more, standard consulting, bigger corporation. So making the decision to join Deliveroo in Kuwait when they were essentially still a very, very small company, probably 4 or 5 years into the setup of the company. It was a startup, still hadn't IPO'd, not recognized much in the Middle East, not recognized in Kuwait. And so taking that complete leap to join a startup and build something changed, my perspective, kind of put me on this accelerated learning path of what it means to build a business from scratch and think about every little thing and obsess over kind of the building process. And so, yeah, I think those two moments in my career, there's also so many things. It's never like two pivotal things, but those moments in my career just had such a big impact on the way I think about the future, the way I think about my own career, and opened my mind to the world of possibilities and things that I could do.
No, that is great. Thank you. And I think it's very interesting that you're mentioning, even coming from an engineering background, and then also moving and shifting to different industries, which is definitely great. And I think that kind of helps as well to bring that mix of expertise.
Yeah, I think when you're young, especially in this part of the world, I'm Kuwaiti, I was born and raised here. I think as I realize now that as young adults, when you're first going to college, you don't realize the world of possibility. I think you think, hey, I'm going into an academic career. I will study this subject matter and then I will apply it. And the reality is it's much more about going to an academic institution, learning how to problem solve, how to work in teams, and then going and doing, anything you want. I mean, in a sense, and you're not confined necessarily to like a very specific career path. And I think it's almost people, the younger generation maybe now is more aware, but there was like an underappreciation and education around kind of your prospects and your opportunities. And I think it's now when I speak to younger people, I always want to let them know that, like, you have so many opportunities. You can study one particular thing, but you have to know that there's so many interesting things that you can do in the world and your career, and you should be open to that.
Which is a great segue to my next question, Seham, which is more around, the culture and building culture, particularly in an environment. So can you tell us a little bit more about your leadership style and what's your method for building a culture and an employee engagement, and how that is different and unique?
It's an ongoing journey, and I have to be very honest. It's something I struggle with and I think about almost every single day, because it changes depending on the size of the organization that you're operating in. It changes based on the stage of the organization that you're in. It changes based on the tenure of the employees you have around you and how long they've been doing any particular thing. But I think probably one of the toughest things about being in this kind of management leadership role that you don't always think about before you get there is how do you influence and build culture, and that you have, it's not something you do once and then that's fine, it's set. It's something you work on all the time. So when I first joined Deliveroo, and I was building a team, it was like it's a startup and you're scrappy and you're building something, and I'm involved in every interview to hire someone. I'm involved in all the recruiting and poaching, and I'm thinking about it. And so I'm bringing in a team that I'm very close to and I've kind of handpicked. And my leadership style was, lead by example, think out loud, come into the office early, work hard, share your thinking, and kind of, you have this small, tight-knit group of people around you, and they, it's kind of almost like osmosis. They're kind of learning from you. They're seeing what you do. And that's like, you influence the culture, and it's the easiest part of the journey. Not easy, but easier because it's still a small group. I think then when as you get into a larger organization, as you start to get more removed from, you're not going to hire every single individual. You're not going to be able to work with every single individual. Then you get to a stage, I think, when you're in a bigger company where you have to lead and influence and build the culture through your middle management and through the people that you work closely with, because they are going to start to have kind of a wider range of teams that they influence. And so I think then when you kind of move from that startup phase to the next phase, I think you need to have very strong, close conviction with your key managers, where there's a lot of communication around what you're trying to achieve, how you want to try to achieve it, and that they're bought into the vision you have and they're participants in that vision, in order to get them kind of to be motivated and incentivized to work hard and build culture and build a certain rapport in the team. And you need them to kind of pass that on to the rest of the organization. And so I think it becomes like more about your relationship with your direct reports and your trust in those people, and your ability to identify, when you have the right team and when you don't necessarily have the right team, to be able to maintain kind of the work culture and the ethic and the vision that you want within your team. But yeah, and then as it gets bigger, that gets even a step harder. You have to be able to make sure that trust and that kind of layers and pyramid in the organization is really filtering through, and you have the right trust at every layer to maintain the culture that you're looking for. But I think it's, I think it's, to simplify or to kind of put it into a few key things that I always try to do. One is I try to communicate very clearly and very regularly with the broader team, and with, especially like I mentioned, that middle management layer. So communicate and listen to make sure that we're all aligned on what we're trying to do, and it's kind of going through the organization. Two, I think identify when you have the right people and when you don't have the right people around you, and making sure that you course correct that as you go. That's something that you learn as organizations get bigger, that as much as you kind of try to instill a culture, you need to make sure that you're instilling a culture that fits the people that you have in your organization. And if you don't have the right fit, you need to think about how to make sure you have the right fit of people. And I think over time, you have to maintain kind of the trust, which means, you commit to what you say, you're honest and you're transparent with your team, kind of links to this communication piece. But I think you need to maintain and build the trust to be able to, to portray and push down kind of the values that you expect and the culture that you expect in the organization. But lastly, I'll say, I think one thing I've noticed too about organizations as they grow, especially if you have kind of a founder or a leader or a GM that is very instrumental to the business, is culture evolves around that person. And many times, like, you can set a culture and you can say, this is our culture, or these are the things that we hold true. But over time, those things morph into the identity and the values of the person in charge, or the founder or the leader. And I've learned to accept that and think that's okay. You know, you can shape a culture and you can identify the values, but you have to accept that the things that you do and the way that you work and the way that you think and your values and the culture of kind of you as an individual will seep into the organization. And so you have to constantly be refining that and making sure that you're comfortable that this is what your organization is going to start to reflect. So yeah, a few different things like around culture, but it's something that you think about every single day. And I don't think is ever set in stone. Maybe one last example, like at Deliveroo, since I've joined the company, which is almost 5 years, we've changed our company values, like as a list of values, 4 times. I started with one. So there's always that refresh of like, what are the values? How do we hone them into a few words? And then how do we make sure they get through the organization and people kind of embrace them and live by them?
Mm-hmm. And they evolve as well, right? Depending as well on some of the priorities and the fast pace of the environment as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hope that like a good chunk of them are always the same. Like one of the core values at Deliveroo when I started, and now it's morphed, is customer obsession. You know, you're always customer obsessed. You're always, as part of the company, thinking about your end customer and how their journey is and obsessing over that. And that obviously has changed as the organization gets bigger. But it's gone from, obsess over the customer. We are a customer obsessed to, we live and breathe the marketplace that we live in. So it evolves, but some of the core values of a company and of certain leaders are always kind of ingrained in no matter how big you get. And you see that in organizations from Netflix to Airbnb. It kind of sticks with them, but you got to morph and you got to evolve, as the size of the organization changes, obviously, over time.
And I've also noticed you Seham, you do also a lot of activities around women empowerment and driving as well, gender diversity within the environment. So yeah, I know those are a number of areas that are also quite, of an active or proactive area that you kind of take on.
Yeah, I do, and I have done, just being a woman, being in kind of the world of business. I think the number one thing for me when I participate in anything that's trying to showcase women is just to put myself out there and say, look, I'm a woman. We all face challenges. There's always barriers, but I'm in this position. I've done certain things to get to where I am. And that opportunity is available to all women, and we shouldn't think less of ourselves. We should feel like we can see leaders and women who are examples. I think a lot of you always say, and you hear this in different industries, that younger people and younger women in particular want to see someone that looks like them or someone that they can relate to. And I think when I first came back to Kuwait after living in New York for many years, I felt like there was a shortage of women that were representing leadership positions, whether it was at any panel discussion, you just see like 6 men sitting at the panel discussion, or a conversation or interview. It felt like you had a few kind of token women, but the business world was monopolized by a lot of men. And so I tried to put myself in a position where, I'm just visible and I can speak about my experiences. Not that they're different or particularly unique. I think men and women in leadership deal with a lot of the same things, but so that younger women and women who are thinking about a career in leadership and business are like, okay, I see someone who kind of looks like me or who resembles me. And so that's always been important for me to stay visible. And even in opportunities that really are not specifically about women or women in power, I'll put myself out there to be vocal and to represent women on a seat and have kind of a voice, just to have that diversity of thinking. And I'm super proud. I mean, at our team at Deliveroo, we're super focused on gender equality, women in the workplace, giving people the right opportunities. And we have a DEI team, diversity, equality, and inclusion team. And we try to think proactively and systematically about how to make sure there are opportunities for women. So we don't just think of it as a top line number where it's like, you should have 50% women in leadership. It's never that simple, right? You have to kind of go down the chain and say, okay, what does it mean if we want to have diversity in our leadership and in our employees and in our management, what do we need to do? And one of the things we identified is we need to just give equal opportunities down the chain in the recruiting process to women. It doesn't mean that we're going to choose a candidate because she's a woman. I think that would be a disservice to women. It would be a disservice, and it would not be necessarily the right thing to do. But you say, okay, when you're interviewing for a role, you want to make sure that you get 50% women, 50% men in the candidate pool, so that you're giving a fair chance and you're considering a wider variety of people. And whoever gets the role, is the rightful person, and we give them that chance. But that's something we thought about to make sure we have inclusion and we have diverse teams. And it's not only, like I said, just because you want to meet a top-down quota. It's because it creates environments and discussions and roundtables where you have more diverse opinions, a balanced kind of input from whether people from different backgrounds, women, men, and that just makes you a better company, makes you better leaders. And I think it sets you up for success. And in my team in Kuwait in particular, we have a ton of women in leadership. I mean, I think 60% of the leadership team is made up of women. And part of that is because our recruiting process allows opportunities. And maybe part of it is because I'm a woman. And so, like I said, if you put yourself in that position, women can look up and say, oh, wow, that's someone like me, or I'd love to work with a woman, or kind of gives them that extra push. So that's something I'm super proud of. And I'll always be thinking about that, I think, in my career, because I want younger women to look up and say, okay, yeah, there's no reason that I'm not in that position, or there's no self-doubt, or there's nothing kind of blocking me from seeing myself, in leadership and management.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. And so kind of connecting to your answer, what is the most dangerous behavior or traits that you have seen that derail female leaders in their career?
I think the word that comes to mind that I hear from so many young women is confidence. I think women are equally as capable, equally as successful, equally as accomplished. I think the one thing that sometimes and I think there's almost evidence of this even in different studies and books that I've read, is women are more likely to have self-doubt and not feel confident. So they have the right ideas. They have just as much experience to raise their hand and say something, or to share a thought, or to put themselves forward in a position, to get to the next step, or go into their manager's office or whatever and ask for a raise, a promotion, have that like confidence to say, I want more. I think that is the one thing that I've also been guilty of, where we sometimes don't feel as confident, and so don't put ourselves in the positions to succeed. And I think it stems from, I've read different books and articles about it. It stems from, deep entrenched kind of cultural values, ways kind of women and girls are raised to feel a little bit less risk-taking, a little bit less confident. And that's something I've spoken to, even at Deliveroo, a lot of my mentees, we have mentorship programs and leadership programs for women about, like, don't be your own obstacle. And it's easier said than done, but find ways to build your confidence, find ways to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, because you deserve it, because you have the capability, and you have the experience, and kind of go that extra mile, and it makes a big difference. Confidence, exuding that confidence, coming across with a sense of confidence, because it's not an ego thing, because you're the right person for the right job, can really, once you get to kind of senior levels of leadership and even kind of mid-management, can get you to the next step, can open up the opportunity for you to do more, and I think that's super important. And I don't know if you've seen, I think I remember seeing a study about, the person, like jobs on LinkedIn that are kind of senior roles. You'll see most men will apply to a role that is more senior than their experience without thinking twice. I can't remember the exact details, but they'll apply to a role that says director, even though they're like an associate, and they'll apply to those roles and put themselves forward. A woman is much less likely to put herself forward for a role because she'll, oh no, I don't have the experience, I'm not as confident. So just that little step of putting yourself forward, I think, I think we need, I always encourage kind of younger women to do, and I push myself to do it. I've had my own kind of struggles with that, and making sure, oh, am I the right person? No, I'm not good enough, and kind of getting that out of my head and saying, I can do it, and I need to put myself forward.
That's great. So that you're really coming into the area of kind of that confidence and being discouraged, or have you felt, coming this long way in your journey, in your career, were there moments where you were discouraged, where you wanted to quit? What would you advise our audience and viewers not to quit?
Yeah, of course. Especially in my early career, as a consultant, I don't know if people are kind of familiar with management consulting. It's a very tough kind of industry to work in. There's a lot of feedback and you're amongst a peer group of very, very hardworking, smart, brilliant people, and you're measuring up to that. And so it's very easy every day to look around and feel like you're not good enough, like you're not doing enough, you're not smart enough. And so that self-doubt creeps in, and it can be crippling. And I remember going through a phase in my career where I really was crippled by myself, because I really doubted my capability, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And so I felt like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And there's no silver bullet. It's not something you can just say, just take it out of your head and get out of there. I think once I went through that and I realized how hard it is, and I started to get into a system of trying to retrain my brain around how I think about confidence, how I think about myself, how I make sure that doubt and self-doubt doesn't impede me or get in my way, and I put myself in the right position to succeed. And I started on that journey of, reading a lot about people who understand kind of the brain and how it works, reading books like Growth Mindset, or, about how to reprogram the way you think about yourself. Not necessarily that's not necessarily going to be the one thing that makes you successful or allows you to progress in your career, but you get out of your own way. You get your mind in having the right frame of mind, so that you can reach kind of the potential that you have, and you don't get in your own way. So definitely there's been times in that part of my early career as a consultant, even down the line, where I've had that doubt, and I've said, I don't know if I can, if I can get out of this particular position we're in as a company, or if I can motivate my team. And I think a lot of it, a lot of getting out of that is a bit of self-reflection and a bit of kind of getting out of your own way and allowing yourself the opportunity to think and set a strategy without kind of your mind getting in the way. And then, you do your best to execute that. There's always going to be ups and downs. And, someone I remember once said that people always will show you like a one-page resume and it looks amazing. So, wow, this person has achieved all these things. But for every one page of career achievements, there's usually like 10 pages of career failures and things that didn't work out, and places you got rejected and jobs you didn't get. And, and we don't always show that. We kind of show the successful part. But I think finding kind of a way to keep going, finding a way to continue to problem solving, reflecting inwards, and then, always putting myself in an opportunity to be able to perform and succeed has kept me going. And I think now, I'm less likely to get into those moments, but we all do, and we all have to face that.
Seham, one of the areas that you have mentioned is more about women having more confidence. And if we specifically zoom onto Arab women in the Middle East and their confidence level operating in a more male-dominated environment, what are your thoughts there? What is your opinion? What are your findings? If you can share with us, that would be great.
Yeah. So in my career, I kind of spent probably the majority of my career in New York, actually, where it was a different environment than coming back to Kuwait. Surprisingly, there are some similarities around kind of your position as a woman, how you best position yourself, and kind of being very outnumbered in many of the settings that I've worked in. In consulting, it was probably a 70-30 ratio of women to men. In business school, it was a 70-30. And then coming to Kuwait, where that's probably in leadership positions, it's even more, it's more of a gap of like the number of women you see in those positions. I think the biggest challenges that I've seen in the business world when you're doing business in a place like Kuwait, being a Kuwaiti woman, is the importance of network and the importance of, male networks in getting things done. And I think if you think about leadership business communities in a place like, I'll take Kuwait, a lot of business gets done. A lot of trust is built based on personal networks and relationships that a lot of them are kind of exclude women. If you think of the concept of a duaniya or majlis in the UAE, that is a place where men get together, men talk about politics, and men a lot of time talk about business. And so business relationships and business trust stems from personal trust. I think that's quite a cultural thing. And so as a woman, you're not always naturally inserted into that environment, right? If you need support, or you need to work with someone, or you need to, agree a commercial deal, which in business, you're going to do that a lot. You need to negotiate. Your starting off point is outside of that circle. And I think that's something that I didn't know how to deal with in my early days, kind of coming back to Kuwait. How do I insert myself in that position if I have a business interest, if I need to talk to someone? And a specific example I remember is when COVID happened in Kuwait. I'm working for Deliveroo. We needed to find ways to continue to deliver. And we needed basically to talk to government agencies, the traffic department, to find ways to unlock this, right? And I found that my peers, my counterparts, the competitors had personal relationships that allowed them to unlock this obstacle, because they can lift up the phone and say, you're someone I know, we're man to man, and I need help here. And I didn't have that access. And so I think I had to, again, coming back to this conversation about confidence, I had to overcome that, like, is it appropriate? I need to call someone, and I'm not part of that network. I'm not part of that trust. How do I insert myself into that and ask for support? And I had to just say, look, I am accomplished. I am a business leader, and I'm in my rights, and I'm not going to be deterred by this idea that I'm an outsider as a woman. And I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to ask for what I need. And I did, but I think those obstacles exist. And I think similarly for a place like Kuwait, where we have a parliament and we have women who run for elections, one of the biggest things they struggle with is how do they build connections and build trust with voters if they are not in those social circles? They don't have that trust. And so you see women, I don't know if you've ever seen the political scene in Kuwait, women candidates going to a Duania, a Majlis, and saying, even though it's uncomfortable, and even though it's not the norm, and even though it takes a lot of courage and confidence to say, I belong here and I need to come into this network to be able to build and have success in my political career, and they do it, and they say, and that's kind of how I thought about myself. I said, okay, I have to have that view. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that you just need to accept. There's a level of discomfort, but the more we do it and the more we insert ourselves and break those norms as women in politics do, I think the easier it gets for everybody to break into that and to have opportunities to be on equal footing. So yeah, that's kind of my biggest obstacle. And I think we need to continue to all do it and put ourselves in that position, just like I said before, so that younger women are like, oh, if somebody else has done that in whatever field, it could be in business, it could be in politics. They look up and say, someone has been able to do that, so I should be able to do that. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that kind of comes to mind.
So what were your biggest lesson? What was the biggest lesson learned for you in your career to date?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it kind of comes back to that like the biggest lesson is don't get in your own way. There's so much you can achieve. You have to be open to that, and you have to always explore, but put yourself out there to do something that maybe scares you, or put yourself out there and say, yes, I want to do this, or yes, I can do this. Don't be afraid of that challenge. Don't let your own mind or your self-doubt make you go, no, I'm not going to apply for that job, or no, I'm not going to ask for that addition, like that bigger role. Put yourself out there. You might succeed, you might have struggles, but if you don't allow yourself to try, like they say, like I don't know if it's like a famous quote or like a thing that you miss all the shots you don't take kind of thing, like putting yourself in that position and then, setting yourself up to succeed is the biggest lesson I've learned that I wish I had done earlier. I wish I was less, I kind of put myself out more and said, yes, I can do this, or I can, and give myself that opportunity. When you've done kind of the work and you've built your skill set, et cetera. I'm not saying that I will go like today and just go to a bank and say, hey, I should be the CEO. I think you have to be realistic about your capabilities. But when you know your skill set and you know what you're capable of, and you see that opportunity that maybe feels like it's 10, 15, 20% above kind of, it's not as comfortable, it's more tough, go for that and say, okay, I can do that. And I want to put myself in a position where I can try and accomplish XYZ, or try to execute on this potential role. I think is one of the biggest lessons that I've learned.
Excellent. And that as well, I mean, in the tech environment, and with the fast pace and the volatile economy, the world that is spinning and really moving forward very fast within the technology side, what would be your advice to the future generation, looking at the key advice that you feel that the next generation, and even whether it's women or even young men, I mean, what would be your advice for them?
Everything you mentioned, right? Things are moving fast, things are changing. There's so many different, new technologies that could change the way we work, the way we think. I think self-education and taking and kind of looking and learning and building your education in a way, I think is critical to be able to keep up with the landscape in today's world. And what I mean is, people will go to college and they'll learn, you'll learn for 4 years, you'll have some kind of skills, and then you'll go into the work world and you'll be in kind of a 9-to-5 job. Maybe you're working and you're learning in that process. But I think the learning you do outside of whatever you're doing on a day-to-day is absolutely critical for you to continue to build your skills, for you to understand what are the opportunities out there, what is interesting, where's, I think that time you spend with yourself, whether it's on your weekends, outside of work hours, on vacation, when you're picking up a couple of books, when you're reading a bunch of articles, when you're going on ChatGPT and you're learning, that self-learning and that kind of constant keeping up with what's happening in the world is something that in this fast-paced environment, when you're looking to build yourself and have fulfillment, and when you do, is something that you can't go without. I, as much as I learn things in my career and my work and from the people around me, I learn a ton just from making sure that I'm reading. I'm constantly reading things about what's happening in the world that might not be directly related to what I'm doing. Whether it's what's happening in the world of AI, how is that evolving? How are tech investments changing in the last few years, and where are investors kind of leaning? Where are they putting their money? What is that mindset? Behavioral and leadership, and like what are the new theories and research about growth mindset or not? And I think that learning and keeping up in that sense and educating yourself and taking your education journey into your own hands and always building and learning adds to your ability to work well and do more and think outside the box, but also you're always prepared for what's next, and you always have a sense of what's coming and where you see yourself. So yeah, I think you have to have that. For me, like having that appetite to learn outside of what I do every day. It excites me, it entertains me. I recently took like a macroeconomic refresh course on like Coursera. Like it teaches me things that then I put into perspective and I apply to my job or my board position. And I love when I have those moments when I read something and I'm like, wow, this is super interesting. It's a different context, but then I'm in a meeting and I'm like, wow, that thing I read about, like it could apply in a way that I didn't really think about in my day to day. So yeah, I think that's
it's ongoing, right? That's
it never stops.
Yeah. No, definitely.
It's kind of like people will talk about like the importance of reading and being, but I think it's about like that intellectual curiosity. You build that muscle to always be curious and always be up to date. And I remember again somebody saying this, I don't remember, a podcast or something, where they said the one thing that a lot of successful founders have in common, like you have all kinds of founders who've been successful, who've built companies, but the one thing this person said that he'd met a lot of founders, the one thing that he found in common with every single one is they were crazy readers. They love to consume information from all different, backgrounds and industries that they could apply to their day to day. And one of the books I remember our founder, Will Shu, talked about it's a book about Lee Kuan Yew, who's the first prime minister of Singapore. It's a book about politics and about building a country, but I picked it up and I started reading it, and the things you learn that in there about management and dealing with people, you're not going to find it in kind of your typical training course in a university or in your job, but you're going to find it when you go and you have that curiosity to build your own knowledge and your own, you have this own education that you're building all the time.
Great. Well, now that we're coming to the end of our episode, Seham, thank you so much for your time today and really sharing with us your story and your advice. And I really wish you, and we wish you on behalf of Kingsley Gate, a lot of success ahead of you. And we also like to thank our viewers tuning in. And also we look forward to many more future episodes that would be coming up in the spotlight. And if you would like to get more inspiring stories from around the globe, please click on our website. And until our next episode, I thank you and goodbye.